welcome to episode 47 of the Hard Truth About B2B eCommerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm here with Tim.
Hey, everybody. I'm Timothy Peterson. Welcome. We're nearing episode 50, so very, very exciting. We started this a year plus ago, and it's been an amazing ride, and we're just looking forward to hearing from more of our listeners and just happy to have another episode coming. Let me give a quick shout out to our sponsor before we dive in and introduce our guest. So Punch Out To Go, one of our great and original sponsors. They're a global B2B integration company. They're specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. Their iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. And with their solution, you can immediately reduce integration, if I can only say it, integration complexities for punch-out catalogs, electronic purchase orders, invoices, and other B2B sales order automation documents. Thank you to Punch Out To Go. And Isaiah, I'm going to shoot it back to you to introduce our great guest today.
Well, before we do that, remember we have our second sponsor.
Oh my gosh, we have so many sponsors. We need more time, more sponsors. That's right.
Yeah. So very recently, Balance is our newest sponsor, and they're a very unique player in the B2B e-commerce space. As most people know, in e-commerce, you have your traditional payment gateways, Stripe, that kind of stuff, PayPal. But none of these really offer the flexibility around B2B e-commerce. So what Balance does is they take the complexity out of payment solutions for B2B e-commerce and offer all the flexibility around payment methods such as ACH, wire, checks, credit cards. They even offer term limits and even incentives for different parameters that you can offer your customers. And all of that's unified into one platform. And there's even more kind of advanced stuff that they offer beyond that. And so it's really the first B2B e-commerce dedicated platform out there, which is pretty cool. And we're excited to have them as a new sponsor. So regardless of what platform you're on, doesn't really matter. You should be checking out Balance for payments and moving to B2B e-commerce payments, not just, your traditional consumer payments that you might be used to.
And if any of our listeners want to sponsor, we're always happy to talk. And we have even more opportunities beyond this. There's so many exciting things going on. It's hard to even put it all out there. But let's dive in. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited to have Chris. I think I'm saying your name right. Chris Bidleman. Is that correct?
Actually, Bidleman.
Bidleman. Chris Bidleman. Join us from Celigo. And you were recommended to us from the Celigo team as kind of an expert in, B2B e-commerce and integrations and many things. We've already had a guest from Celigo on, but I think this will be maybe a little more focused on some different topics. And this is much deep. That was early on in the podcast. So a lot has changed in the past year.
That it has.
So tell us more about your background and how you got it, how you started at Celigo.
Yeah, sure. So I appreciate the invite. So my name's Chris Bidleman. I'm the Director of Solution Integrations at Celigo. Been with the company a good 10 years now. Celigo's been in the integration space for 14 years. So this is certainly something that we've gone through a lot of different iterations. If people not familiar with Celigo, we are basically featured in iPaaS, which is integration platform as a service. So the usual connect anything to anything is sort of our mantra. Certainly focused on NetSuite and other ERPs out to e-commerce, but certainly B2B is a huge space for us. And then personally, I've been a supply chain weenie for a good 20 plus years. So, a lot of different aerospace and technology and consulting and traveling across the US for hundreds of thousands of miles a year. So I've seen a lot of country and a lot of different customers and their challenges. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time. Gray beard kind of gives away the age there, but yeah, certainly willing to share it. Even lived through the .com era, or late 90s and 2000s. So it's funny, I'm seeing some of the same stuff then, now, these days. Here we are 20 years later.
What were you doing then? What were you doing in the first .com boom?
It was interesting. I was a business consultant with a consulting firm, and we were talking to a lot of the emerging e-marketplace players throughout Silicon Valley and others. And even back then, the thing that we were doing is strategy sessions and looking at infrastructures of how are you going to connect up all these different systems, or your users to somebody else's, or pet food, or all these different and interesting business models where we would come out and be able to at least give them a roadmap of, okay, infrastructure wise, you need to have this, business wise, you need to be that. But some ways we're looking, well, how are you guys going to make money? But obviously a lot of them didn't. And, back then there was a lot of VC money flowing into that business. So I saw a lot of good business. Actually, one of the companies I was working with was Ariba back then, right at the merging, and became not necessarily a consultant, but I was working with them and a few others in that e-procurement space. And now it's interesting seeing how even Ariba is one of the few that has survived, and SAP.
Yeah,
SAP now owns them. Yeah.
Yep.
But they're still kind of doing the same thing. Yeah. That whole Ariba network for buyers. So, exactly what we're talking about today is that whole B2B space. They're still live and kicking, and we still do integrations to that network. So it's great to see, here we are. I mean, I remember being in San Jose at one of their big blowout parties, and it's like going, wow, wonder if these guys are going to make it.
We'll save that for the outtake reel, your blowout party recollections. We'll save
that. Yes, indeed. So there was a lot of money floating around back then.
You said you're seeing some of the same stuff. Is it that there's just a lot of VC money pumping into a lot of these companies that you're not sure are going to make it? Is that what you're seeing? Or
yeah, a lot of it. Certainly through the different marketplaces. Again, it's kind of the same thing. Different day, just like fashion and hairstyles. It just kind of comes around again. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of these social media and other companies that are popping up. Again, you kind of wonder about their business model. Can they make money, and can they get in there and actually make it go of it? And some are doing well, some are not. A lot of them are our customers. It's always fun for us when I'm sitting on the couch and seeing a commercial for a company I just talked to, a week ago, advertising on national TV. So it's sort of fun because my wife trying to explain what I do, and I said, well, we're just basically plumbers of the internet. We're just connecting one system to the other. So that's kind of what we do day in, day out.
So tell us about how you see that impacting B2B e-commerce. Like, obviously B2B e-commerce, even as like a term, is, I think, still somewhat relatively new, like wasn't really thrown around that much, until the last few years, where we started to see like a big, hey, this thing is something to take seriously, and it's not the same thing as just e-commerce.
Well, yes and no. I mean, this has been going on for decades as far as that. I mean, case in point, a lot of companies are still doing EDI. EDI has been around 30 plus years. We as a company still do EDI. If you wanted to transact with a big box store, like Walmart or some of the others, even Amazon, they're still doing EDI. Granted, they're starting to introduce some APIs, but that whole business, supplier buyer relationship's been going on for a long time. But yeah, the relationship has changed significantly, and I think COVID has also sort of accelerated some of those changes. So, case in point, when we enable a lot of Amazon Vendor Central people. So Vendor Central is basically Amazon buying goods from a supplier, and then EDI, and they send out a purchase order, and you ship it to Amazon, and then they distribute it out through their warehouses, and then you buy it. But because of COVID and Amazon changing their model that only essential goods was going to be in their warehouses, they actually forced a lot of suppliers to change their model to actually do drop ship, or they call Amazon direct fulfillment. And so we've seen a change in that relationship. And then a lot of other suppliers now also willing to take on being, seller fulfilled prime and doing these other type of things. And as Amazon goes, everyone else is shifting towards that model. So, another thing we've seen a lot of changes is Walmart. So Walmart now offers fulfillment services. So we used to never hear about Walmart, WFS, Walmart Fulfillment Services, but they're starting to open up more warehouses. Shopify is even now introducing that sort of market, Amazon FBA, fulfillment by FBA model. So again, the relationship is getting I think B2B and B2C is actually getting blurred a bit, if anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. That's a big part about what we talk about in the podcast, and how B2B companies need to kind of have a little bit more of a B2C mindset, maybe get their product catalog more easily accessible online. There's still a lot of B2B companies that some of them do hundreds of millions of dollars. And you go to their website, it's like 5 pages or like an old content website. You can't see their product catalog. Like you don't even they might tell you the categories that they sell, but it's not very clear what they sell. Right. So, I think just even getting your catalog up online is a big lift that most companies should be doing,
that's huge. And, obviously one of your sponsors about having punch out catalogs and that information available is huge for buyers. And we've seen that shift. I mean, for years now I think anyone as a consumer is expecting to know exactly how many do you have in stock, or having that visibility, which before you never worried about, or you just took an order and it went on back order and you waited and eventually it showed up. And so, we kind of accepted that. But now I think everyone, because they have the ability to shop around and find new suppliers or new things very quickly, that visibility of your supply chain is definitely an advantage for companies to be able to present that. And that's a lot what we've been enabling too. And, you talked about distributor models too, as far as be able to see what your suppliers, if you're a distributor, have available, and be able to display that within your different channels, because everyone's multi-channel now. You just can't have one website. It's not like if you build it, they will come anymore. You really do have to have a presence on a bunch of different things. So the challenge I see for most companies, even though you make your inventory visible, is how do you keep it updated, because you have your multi-channel and you have a stock out problem. So as far as, over on Big Lots, they just bought everything you had, and now you're out, and now you just lost all these Amazon Prime deals because you just ran out of stock, and then you get in trouble, and it just kind of feeds on itself.
You double sell things, you oversell, or you sell something in California, but you need to get it to Massachusetts, and then you don't have it in the East Coast. So I think logistics is this like more real-time logistics inventory visibility is a key problem that B2B needs to solve.
Well, I mean, I'll interject for a second, because I think you both brought up things that are really, hot for our listeners right now. So, we're recording this in July of 2021, and, COVID's been going on in one way or another for a very long time now. And there are all sorts of supply chain issues that are, continuing or new. Like, for example, I was working with a fashion brand, and they're working with factories in Vietnam, and Vietnam shut down this week. Right, because they only have they have 1% vaccine vaccination rate, and it's they're getting COVID really for the first time, right? So it's going through their wave now, and weeks will pass really before factories are reopening for a lot of people who use those. So it's changing, like being aware of exactly where things are in the supply chain. Having options, just communicating in a very particular way. So it's like, well, where else can I go? What else can I do? This kind of stuff is critical for B2B as well as B2C.
Yeah, absolutely. And those disruptions are I think everyone's kind of, not necessarily gotten used to it, but have had to come up with new strategies, or have, multiple vendors or suppliers just to be able to get around that.
Yeah, you can't rely on one person or one company or one manufacturer. Like, let's say you get all your goods from China, China shuts down.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah, that killed a lot of people, and it's going to take a while because I don't know, I imagine most people, business people, understand that supply chain, you just can't just jam in. I mean, look at what's going on in the semiconductor industry right now.
Yeah.
That was shut down, and it's still trying to take a long time to unwind. It's going, people are predicting next year before that's caught up, because you just can't all of a sudden spool it up and all of a sudden spit out a bunch of products. It takes a while.
And it's sector by sector. It's fascinating because also in furniture, home decor, and building, anything that depends on wood is really having issues because of where fires are, and also because of again, COVID shutdowns in places like South Carolina, where there are so many factories that make furniture. So Wayfair is like, well, what do we do, right? They're looking at the holidays, coming out of that period, and they're already concerned because they're going to be there because of what's happening right this minute. They're going to be completely messed up, by Q4 sometime, right?
Yeah, lead times are all out
So
of whack.
let me ask you a kind of this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's very relevant. You mentioned EDI, and EDI is like kind of I guess you could argue it's like the original like B2B e-commerce to some degree, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it's not what I would consider modern B2B e-commerce in the sense that you have a store and you go on and buy from a distributor, on like an actual like online store. Do you think that EDI needs to be disrupted or is going to be disrupted, and that eventually you need to move to more of like an API kind of real time, faster integration process, or you could still get by with EDI with the larger customers and you shouldn't worry about it? I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, I've talked to a few companies about that. EDI is still sort of that lowest common denominator. I mean, we're talking mainframe based, file formats that we've had to adapt in the cloud, and it's a pain to work with. I mean, the EDI is older than most of the guys who've been doing the programming that are out there today.
For sure.
So yeah, I think a lot of the big box stores are reluctant to change because it just works, and so they don't necessarily see a reason to switch. Though some of them are starting to wake up. I mean, Target's one of those that is sort of moved from EDI to online. Walmart has also switched up. Even Wayfair, they moved from EDI recently to a GraphQL, which actually they kind of jumped to a whole new technology. They leaped. Yeah, and GraphQL is pretty cool, but it's also it's a bit of a pain to work with. So this whole thing about mutations versus queries, even the language itself is different than the standard puts and posts and gets that guys are used to with seeing APIs. So it takes you a little bit to get your head wrapped around it, but we're seeing a big trend towards GraphQL sort of becoming sort of that preferred standard. I mean, Shopify is adopted and a few others. Yeah, exactly. So all of them are kind of moving that direction. So yeah, I do see, back to your original question, of some of the big box stores and others giving options, if you will. So now it's not just you have to go back 20 years of technology and be able to support that EDI. Is now you can adopt and use APIs. Even Amazon, now they're starting to introduce their new APIs for Vendor Central, which frankly aren't great, but hopefully nobody on Amazon's listening to this. But for a very,
I think it's okay. I wouldn't worry.
Oh, I don't know. I invite them every week. I don't know. All those execs should.
We didn't get Jeff Bezos yet, unfortunately, as a guest. We're working on it, though.
We're working on it.
I mean, trust me, I know more about Prime and how goods work than most, and I'm still amazed we can still get our stuff in same day shipping or Prime or in 2 days, because from an Amazon standpoint, it's a difficult platforms to work with. They're all different.
Mm-hmm.
Vendor Central is different from Seller Central, which is different from a lot of the other stuff that they have going on. So it does provide, lots of capabilities, but it's not easy animal to navigate and have to work around. So APIs aren't necessarily the panacea that you want to do. So EDI is pretty predictable, even though everyone's EDI standard is different. Everyone needs to understand that too. One person's 850 PO is not the same as any other. So it is difficult for us as an integrator to try and explain that to customers, saying, well, I have 20 trading partners. Can't I just use the same one over and over and over again? Sorry, no. Every one of them has a different requirement.
Yeah.
So there is still a lot of heavy lift associated with EDI. You still have the big van players out there, like the SPS and GSXs of the world.
Yeah, we're doing a project with SPS right now, actually, because
and so
connect to all their big box retailers. It's like the only way to really do it at scale.
Exactly, and in a way, it's still the best way, because you don't want to do all these point-to-point integrations. Going through a van is kind of a good way for a box retailer not have to worry about all these other little guys trying to connect to you. And so, and the vans are great because they do actually normalize the data. So we, as an integrator, we sort of have this co-opetition, if you will, relationship with the SPS.
Yeah, how does that work? Yeah,
I like that. And we're gonna use that co-opetition.
Yeah, how does that work?
That's I don't know. That's been around. I say that again. That probably was a .com era we talked about.
We call it frenemy.
Frenemy, yeah.
Oh, okay, but anyway, competition with the SPSs of the world, because we compete against them all the time, but we have to also work with them and work together. So it is kind of interesting how we've done it. I mean, even when we do conferences together, it's kind of fun. I always go over to those guys and chat it up, and we talk about working together as well, but we still have to compete, and they could crush us like a bug because they're so huge, but still we have our own little space, and for the smaller retailers who don't want to pay the transaction fees and other stuff that some of the vans charge, then you can go to an iPaaS provider and be able to do those integrations. And then it does give you the flexibility of doing EDI plus API and whatever else that your trading partners want to transact. And I think that's sort of the desire, is to make it simpler for them, because they are being asked to do a lot of different things and work across a lot of different technologies that, a smaller shop, mom and pop place that's providing stuff to all these different marketplaces. I mean, that's what also blows me away compared to before, where you had to have this huge infrastructure, and now people can run these businesses out of their home and be able to be a multi-million-dollar company. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, you'd be shocked with the kind of businesses that are out there these days. But yeah, I'd love to, can you teach our listeners a little bit about where you see iPaaS fitting in, and specifically Celigo. I think we've tried to educate people. If you go back to some of our previous episodes, I did one with our CTO. I talked through all the integration options. We didn't talk too much about EDI, but a little bit. But we talked about iPaaS. We talked about GraphQL. Sure. So I think if you've listened to our podcast, and this isn't your first episode listening to it, you should have a decent understanding of where iPaaS fits in. But tell us about where Celigo fits into the ecosystem, because like you said, you have the SPS commerce, things. You have these tiny little apps that we see, like, some people just use these little Shopify apps, one-to-one, point-to-point integrations, but that's obviously not really a scalable solution. And then, we do work with some large customers that have the MuleSofts of the world that were bought by Salesforce. Jitterbit's another one that comes up a lot. So tell us about how Celigo fits in, and how you guys see yourselves helping, e-commerce, but specifically B2B e-commerce.
Yeah. In this marketplace, it's sort of speed is king, or what we call time to value. Because before, when you had to script out a lot of this stuff, it takes a long time, or again, what kind of blows my mind is somebody wants us to spool up a new warehouse in the UK, your US base, and that used to take months and months. We can do that in a couple of weeks. And so I think that's
integration wise, to be clear, right?
Integration wise, as well as even just them setting up, because as soon as they can ship goods over there, they can start shipping out of those locations. Yeah. So I think the advantage for an iPaaS is a bit, again, I mentioned earlier, we're the plumbers, so we can connect one business system to the others. People in the past have gone with, the SAPs of the world and others that have these huge integrated systems that kind of do it all. But now people have moved, for a while now as a sort of best of breed. They want to have Salesforce, they want to have, a NetSuite, and then they also have all their social media companies, and they got all these different systems which all talk different languages, even though they may have a web API and a REST endpoint or something. iPaaS allows you then to be able to, instead of having a log into those each individual systems to update your catalog, you can have a source of truth. So say your item masters in your ERP, and you can syndicate out how much inventory do I have to all your channels. And so that's really where the advantage is. And for Celigo, our advantage is because we're a new generation of cloud-based iPaaS, as opposed to some of the older companies which might be on older technology, we have the ability to be able to plug in. We are part of, in the AWS is where our platform is, so we have the redundancy and reliability there. But also we've structured it such that a business user can make these connections. You don't need to be a programmer. We have pre-built connectors. You mentioned earlier about, Magento and Shopify and some of these others. We have pre-built connectors, the Amazon and Walmart. And so now it's
more and more every day. I see you guys.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, there is no such thing as plug and play in our space, even though you might be led to believe that, but that's not true.
It's not true.
Everyone's business model is a little bit different, but again, I think that's some of the advantages Celigo has is that flexibility to be able to then adjust it. So we can get you about 80% of the way there. And then if you have certain business rules like, I want to add safety stock into my inventory to reduce down what I'm actually exposing, or I don't necessarily want to tell Amazon everything I have available. So those kind of business rules are really easy for somebody to integrate into their system. But the flip side is as you expand and grow, you want to be able to spool up a new channel or spool up a new warehouse or new location. Now you're shipping out East Coast, West Coast. iPaaS provides us ability to be able to use the same exact tool set to be able to do a lot of that. And we hope that a lot of customers can make these updates on their own without being a programmer, because it's very visual tools. Sure, if you want to do JavaScript behind the scenes, you can, but you don't have to. And so again, I think that's really where the advantage, and when you're doing your due diligence on what iPaaS to buy is, it's always about the connectors. What endpoints can you connect to? And then be able to also how quickly you can use that. And then just notifications, because, again, everyone wants real time. So the ability to be able to do to subscribe to events. There's a term called webhooks, which are publications. So certain events are push out, like Shopify has that. So here's a new order. Poof, do something with it. And so, so set up a listener and be able to react to that. But within Celigo, we also have the ability to have a listener within some of the ERPs. So then when that shipment goes out from the warehouse and then you have fulfillment, boom, we can syndicate that out to the marketplace. So here's your tracking number and here's your information. Or on the B2B space, it's an ASN, advanced shipping notice, because now what you've done is your warehouse has scanned in all the items as they put it in the box, and they wrap it up and they say, okay, there's 10 of those in that box and 10 in this box. And then you got to know the size and width and height of that, because a lot of the, again, the Amazons and Walmarts want to know how many boxes are coming, what's in the box, and how big are those boxes, and how much do they weigh. And so you as a B2B provider need to be able to also put a shipping label on there that meets their GS1 standards. Again, GS1 is another one of those standards that, that little barcode label that you see has to meet their requirements. Not everyone's the same. They each have their own little layout. So you also need the capability to be able to produce that label, put it on the boxes, put it on the pallets. Sometimes they require it on every individual sellable unit to have that barcode. So all those type of things, it's a different thing than just on the B2B side versus B2C, where you just sort of, hey, somebody orders something online, you throw it in a box. I mean, heck, I sell stuff on Etsy, and that's all I got to do. It's completely different on the B2B.
It could be a pallet, it could be LTL, it could be a massive shipment. I mean,
exactly. And so you as a B2B provider have to be able to provide that information. So we as a integrator, maybe you're using a third-party logistics company to actually do your shipping. So they're the ones actually palletizing, pick, pack, and shipping that
that's
item.
very common. Yeah.
And so now we pull that information into your ERP. So now you have that information, and then now we have to send it off to the trading partner as a, in the EDI world, that's an 856, which is an ASN, advanced shipping notice. So they know what's coming to them, and they can then receive it, because they're also looking for that barcode that they can scan in. And so, there's a lot of other stuff that has to happen. And that's, again, back to the original question, long road there is, that's what we as Celigo can do, is be able to consolidate and bring a lot of data into centralized locations. And then, you can be best of breed and be able to have these different places.
Best of breed. I mean, I think that's a really important topic that B2B needs to catch up on. I think B2C is a little bit further ahead there because they were able to quickly adopt like a Shopify, and it's a little bit easier for B2C to adapt to that kind of stuff.
Just to interject, I also think that B2C is more aware of what best of breed is. And I think
agree.
It's more just obvious. Aware always.
Yeah. Would you agree that B2C, it's a little more obvious what best of breed is for the platforms? I think.
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of used to that because, us as individuals, we've evolved on B2C, right? We know what buying on Amazon's like, or, going to any website and buying, clicking, shopping, and getting something delivered. So yeah, switching over to a B2B relationship is a little bit different because there's a lot of, again, trading partner terms and other things that you have to be able to put in place. And yeah, I think the space is not as mature. Again, going back to the whole EDI realm, is they've not kind of kept up with sort of the trends and visibility of the networks. I mean, a lot of times we're having to take a CSV file off of FTP of somebody's catalog and then dropping it into their system just so they have visibility of it. So old school still works, but it's still sort of.
Well, I think
we rather like be able to get an API to pull that information as opposed to a CSV file. Yeah,
I'm curious to hear both your guys' perspective on this, but I think B2B got a little lucky, not lucky, but a little kind of, I don't want to say lazy, but honestly, I think, too unwilling to change in some cases where they built up their business. Let's go back to like the 80s and 90s, mostly early 2000s, around an ERP, like a NetSuite, like a Oracle or whatever, SAP. And they could build most of their business around basically one system, right? And some of these guys are still on AS400, and they were able to do, some of these guys do 100 million, 200 million, 300 million in B2B, basically around one system, which obviously most likely is not best of breed anymore. And now, to your point, it's like to be more competitive, you got to start thinking, okay, I might need 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 best of breed systems. It's a whole different mindset shift,
Yeah, and sometimes they they may not have the IT infrastructure to even be able to support something like that. So they just don't. But
I mean, and I would just add too that, and our listeners have heard this before, but one of my views on this is, I've worked on B2B and on B2C e-commerce. I worked on both, and in B2B, there's still sort of, at least the folks I work with, there was more of like mystery and secret handshakes and, guilds, there was like these cultures that were
trade guilds. And
I mean, it was very distinct and very connected to all of these historical ideas. So when I was working with people in lighting or in fire alarm systems or all these things, there's like all of these established ways of getting business done. And breaking through all of that is very different from saying, I'm going to start an apparel brand for consumers and figure it all out, or I'm going to start selling candles online and figure it all out. Yeah. It's a very, very different thing because of all of the established rules and practices and people and organizations. And slowly I think people are getting through it. And it's, as you said too, Chris, it's really about the the history and the money. If you're making a couple $100 million off of something, a system that's AS400 based, then you don't want to mess that up.
Well, yeah, why change it?
Why mess that up, right?
But I guess the advantage I have as a solution architect, I get pulled in a lot of different things, and I talk to a new industry or something, and they have that one application that's been around for 10, 20 years, and it's latest client server or AS400 based system, but
20 years of data in it.
Yeah, exactly. And they're asking me to integrate to it. And I was like, oh shoot, what's my options here? And okay, you're behind. It's on-prem, and we'll
I have on-prem.
Yeah, I have an on-prem agent. Even SAP, ECC, the old big iron SAP systems. People say, yeah, can you integrate with it? Well, they're using iDocs, which is like almost like EDI. It's just a flat file format that is really difficult to work with. I said, well, no, but if you drop a CSV file on your doorstep, I'll grab it and then I'll give you one back. And so they can still integrate that way. But there's certainly systems like I was talking about a furniture manufacturer, and there's just like this, or rug manufacturers. They have that one system that's been used in the industry. Everybody uses it. And so they want us to integrate to that. And it's so highly custom because if you think about those, essentially those build to order type.
Oh, I know. I've got a project right now, custom furniture, literally infinite permutate. Like we couldn't even, we don't even have SKU. I mean, you can't even have SKUs at that level because it's literally bajillions of possibilities.
Yeah, exactly. Or I worked with a suit manufacturer, build to order suits that of course then had to go out to China and get built, and now it's basically an assembly on the fly that we had to create within the ERP system. So again, a lot of the the common ERPs are not designed to even accommodate that. So we as an integrator sometimes have to create customizations or other things that trying to fit that square peg in a round hole thing to work. And it's not always the best thing. So yeah, the best of breed still is very pertinent because certain systems are just designed to work with that, as opposed to customizing the heck out of something that's probably just not going to work as well. Back to, what we were talking earlier about, using the wrong e-commerce platform that they should be doing for what they're trying to do.
You get a lot of money on the wrong platform. That's what I can say.
Okay. So two questions. The first one is, where it's kind of a where do we go from here, which I like asking to a lot of our folks, because I feel like it's not just COVID, but it's a lot of other things that have come brought us to this moment where are we in this transformation for B2B? What technologies, plural, need to be, considered and adopted? Is it the next 3 to 5 years that we're going to see an explosion of different things happening, or is it longer? I mean, that's sort of one big question. And the part two is, you mentioned Etsy, so I just have to ask you, like, what you're selling on Etsy. I want our listeners to hear, because you can't just drop something like that in the podcast without me picking it up. Because it's like, is it scented candles? I got to hear that too. So
it's kind of funny. Well, let's see. I guess I'll answer the first question first, as far as where do we go from here. So, everyone talks about the speed of the internet. And so I don't think it's 3 to 5 years. I really think a lot of companies have got to switch here within the next year or so. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them have that wake up call. They are, as I mentioned before, a lot of these guys have been doing EDI forever, are switching to APIs or other methods not just saying you have to completely switch, but you have alternatives. I mean, unless you're like Amazon, which just says, okay, well, we're going to get rid of MWS and now you guys got to use something different. We're shutting it off on this date. It's like, okay, but they're Amazon. They can do that. Others
most
don't
companies
have
don't have
luxuries.
that like that power to kind of dictate the market. So,
yeah. Right. And so I think people do have to sort of shift their mindset to B2B, be more like B2C as far as visibility into the supply chain, because people want to know, okay, well, when is that shipment going to come in? Even if it's delayed over the seas. So, and what happens with that? Because they want predictability, they want updates. I mean, even tracking. Everyone's got used to FedEx and UPS type.
Uber.
Uber. Exactly where my stuff is at one time. So now LTL shipments. Almost have to be that same way. And they are. They all got GPS. They know where that stuff is within the supply chain. So they could easily offer that. I've had a couple clients actually do that for their trading partners to know that, okay, the ship or the truck has left the dock and it's on its way. And
wow.
here's the pro number and off you go. And you can track it if you like. And so, even some of the logistics guys are starting to offer that sort of thing. And,
wow.
The whole driverless EV trucks, that's going to be interesting.
Out. They're coming
That's
out.
coming out. And they're on the road today. People don't realize that.
I would imagine that Tesla's going to have some pretty good, like real-time integration tracking GPS type thing.
Absolutely. So to be able to have that visibility on your website of knowing exactly where that truck is and it's stuck on I-95 right now, trying to get someplace. That's kind of thing that people are expecting. Again, we've been tainted and change just from our B2C experience. So I think everyone's sort of expecting that in the B2B space. Again, the visibility. So that's sort of where people need to get quickly. You can't wait 2 or 3 years or you'll be left behind. And so
do you really think it's important to start now? Like if you haven't started, you got to start now building out some visibility. And would this be building it into like an online portal, e-commerce, or how would you recommend?
A lot of people are used to going into a portal. I mean, a lot of people have been trying to set up vendor portals. A lot of ERPs offer that sort of ability to be able to pay online, to be able to see, place their orders that way, or just be, as we were talking to Ariba earlier, be able to just, go onto that, shop to a bunch of different suppliers, and then poof, out go the POs and in comes the goods. So that's kind of what everyone's sort of expecting. So if you are providing that service, there's probably a lot of different platforms that you could provide that ability. And there is a lot of companies that have their B2B site, be it on Magento or some of these other common platforms that offer both visibility, because you can be both. You can be a seller, you can be a buyer, you can be that relationship. And so you just have different credentials, you log in or flip between the different views. I mean, even Amazon, you have that different flip of that. So again, that's you have to kind of follow these other business models that others of the big guys are doing, that if you want, you as a small player can do the same thing, but you have to offer that same experience that the big guys are. And with a small investment, I mean, that's what's beauty of the cloud too. It allows you to be able to sort of spool up and be able to get some of these services available very quickly without a whole lot of investment.
I agree. Tim, we didn't get to Etsy.
So. I know we didn't get to part 2. I've been waiting for that. I've been waiting.
Etsy. So here's an interesting thing that actually, well, besides what I'm selling there, but Etsy, was one of those. So again, as an SA, I look at a lot of different systems and APIs. Etsy was using an old OAuth 1 protocol to be able to do their APIs. Like going, what are you guys doing? And we as a iPass don't support OAuth 1. And so now we had Etsy on our blacklist for a long time, and they finally woke up and they finally came out with their version. I think it's version 3, their API, and which actually does OAuth 2, which is sort of industry standard, it's secure and all that. And now we can finally connect to Etsy, though I think it's still in beta. They haven't fully released it to general availability. So it was like, again, I was trying to think, why are these businesses selling on Etsy? Because it's sort of like your home shopping thing. So for me, I'm selling, believe it or not, bears. I inherited a bunch of Stife bears from
very fancy. Those are nice.
Grandmother, and and believe it or not, some Barbie dolls too. And I've shipped stuff all over the world to Australia and UK, and here I am, just a bunch of bears and dolls.
I love it. I used to have an eBay business back in the 90s. It was quite a good business, really, back then. So I get it.
So hey, this is part of my inheritance, so I'm not trying to sell these things, but these are $200, $300, $400 bears, and so they're collector items. And,
the button in the ear.
I think that's where some of the biggest opportunity is for, especially even in B2B, is selling on an Etsy or a Newegg if you're in electronics. Because obviously Amazon is pretty saturated, even the Walmart's probably fairly saturated, but if you go down a little bit to some of these other niche marketplaces, you could probably become like the top seller in a niche pretty fast on an Etsy
go to the secondary, because you're going to show up higher on the search list of vendors. And I work with a lot of companies saying, okay, here's my list of all the channels, and it is kind of surprising. Newegg comes up a lot, Google Shopping. Etsy's now starting to show up a lot more, and obviously Wayfair and a lot of these other channels, and some I never even heard of before. That's back to the original point of, I'm seeing these marketplaces pop up like weeds, just like in the .com era of all these
some
things.
Some will survive and some won't.
Wish and some of these others that are out there that are doing these different things. Deal of the day sites and others. I've worked a lot with them or talked to them, and it is interesting to be able to see can they survive, because you're competing against some of these big monsters that have already established themselves. But secondary market's not bad, because a lot of people are just looking for bargains, and with the Google searches and others, they can still find you that way.
Well, and one thing, the connection to B2B is really clear too, because, for example, I do work with a lot of fashion brands and accessory brands and home decor brands and what have you. And sometimes they're looking for components, embellishments, parts on Etsy, right? So they're completing some look, and then all of a sudden they need like a particular kind of toggle that brings, something together. Where do you find it? You go to Etsy if you can't find it on Alibaba, right? So you're really running all over the place. But Etsy has really filled that niche for a lot of manufacturers, a lot of brands. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, sort of what eBay did too. Again, they're sort of that thing, and now they've sort of changed their model. It was interesting, they've got moved away from PayPal. Now they have their own eBay payments, and so that was the other thing. And I guess kind of what your earlier question is, another thing that we as Celigo do is a lot of the back end stuff. So all these marketplaces do settlements. They're going to pay you someday. So how do you bring all those transactions in and account for the fees and all the other things from an accounting standpoint? I mean, I've literally earned my CPA in the last 2 years talking to accounting departments of how to deal with the debits and credits associated with all the fees and storage fees and this and that and the chargebacks and then refunds and how that works out.
So complicated,
and heaven forbid you're on accrual-based accounting, because you'll get stuff across accrual periods that you have to figure out. And then Amazon does a lovely thing where they don't really tell you when it's shipped. They just kind of said, well, it's going to ship within this period, and they don't. And then EU, it's difficult too, because you have that, because now Amazon has all these different things. So they've changed their EU market where it may ship out. You buy something in Germany, but it'll ship out of Poland. And now you have to pay the VAT associated with that shipment, but getting that information out of Amazon of where it actually shipped and charging the right VAT is a big challenge. And so those are some of the other things, just even B2C as well as B2B, that you have to worry about, that is like, whoa, okay, I forgot about that part. Because I always have my joke is, as long as accounting's happy, everyone's happy. And when they're not, well, you have a bad day. So it kind of has to start there too.
I agree with that. When our controller is unhappy, I get kind of nervous.
Exactly.
I agree.
So,
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's sort of the food chain in most companies, is like keep your accounting folks happy, and everything else will kind of fall in place.
So I want to ask one more question. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but could you give us you see so many different systems and so many different things. I'm a big believer in like momentum for best of breed. Like where there's a lot of momentum is usually where the best of breed things are emerging. What systems do you see having a lot of momentum that maybe, or marketplaces that maybe not, like everyone knows Amazon, what ERP systems, what marketplaces that maybe most people haven't thought about, or e-commerce platforms you see gaining momentum that are kind of like that underdog?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, our number one ERP is NetSuite. I mean, it's been huge. The growth is just phenomenal, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down even after Oracle bought them.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of those integrations. I'm seeing a lot of momentum in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 space.
Too, yeah.
Business, well, they have like 20 different versions of Dynamics, but
now I think it's becoming more of a 365. They're finally modernizing it into one cloud.
Exactly. And so that's certainly helped. I mean, we as integrators have that's actually not too bad. Some of their older systems, or the F&O, they keep rebranding all the
we have an
versions.
Old system with Celigo. We have a customer that has an old Microsoft Dynamics. We use Celigo, but it's much harder than if it was 365.
Yeah, and we certainly encourage them to upgrade, because those are nearly impossible to integrate with. But there's the Acumaticas and some of the others. SAP by Design, actually, I've been impressed with. It's sort of for their lower mid-market, and is cloud-based, and so it actually has a lot of really cool features and is pretty easy to integrate. So from the ERP, obviously everything sort of starts from there as far as your financials and order management, inventory management, to be able to do that. And then we're seeing a lot of people always outsourcing to everything. So 3PLs, most of the guys out there can have multiple different ways to integrate via flat files or EDI or APIs, and so that's really a good trend that we see in the areas. And then as far as the e-commerce space, boy, Shopify, BigCommerce is huge areas that we're seeing those slowing down.
I think BigCommerce is in an interesting place right now, where we're seeing, everyone I think kind of knows Shopify in the e-commerce space, but we're seeing BigCommerce and large deals now. They're starting to consider get narrowed down to between Shopify and BigCommerce. And in the past, BigCommerce wasn't in those runnings, and now it's starting to kind of pop up in these. I'm talking about one of those is a 7-figure project.
Yeah, because before you had to kind of go to the old Demandware, which is now Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Exactly.
And that's really expensive and kind of cumbersome, so a lot of people don't want that.
Yeah. And it's still, I hate to say it's sort of a lipstick on a pig, because it's still sort of older technology with a web front end that they put in there, and so it's a little bit difficult to integrate with. But I mean, it's amazing. The volume, and we have a lot of those customers, and the volume they can do is literally tens of thousands of orders a day if they during Black Friday. So, and it doesn't even sweat, whereas some of these others like a Magento or some of these others kind of struggle if they have too many orders coming in at the same time, or they queue up. And so, we have to change our strategy a little bit about how we integrate with some of those systems. But yeah, those are ones we're seeing a lot of these days.
Yep. Cool.
So one last question for me too. So just tell me a little bit so our listeners can hear, like, who are you working with at Celigo right now? Anyone you can share? Anyone fun? Just so our listeners can hear, like, what you're working on, a project that you can share. If you can't, it's okay.
I don't think so. I mean, there. I guess, one I can say, we had this interesting little startup called PayPal that we actually have been working with quite a while and doing a lot of the infrastructure with them.
Really,
for their devices, and so It is interesting seeing what an amazing company and how their growth pattern is and what
I've been using them since the very beginning, and Venmo too. I mean, I'm a big fan. So
they bought a lot of companies too. They own a lot of stuff now.
Well, they do, and so we're sort of their main iPass, and it's kind of fun to be able to see somebody of that size and breadth.
Wow.
And the growth that they're doing, and so they just keep throwing new integrations because they are, again, pulling all these new companies and systems together that they need to integrate with. And so
that's exciting.
It's been a very fun ride because we're used to more of the small to medium sized market, but we're starting to go up market too. And some of these other larger companies like the PayPal's of the world are actually utilizing, again, best of breed and getting all this stuff. So this is definitely where strength of iPass can do it, because they can do a lot of the work themselves now, but they still come in and ask me as an architect to kind of help them out, figure out, okay, how are we going to integrate with this one? Because they have this old legacy system that they're going to keep using. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. One last question, because I know you got to go, but do you think that these larger, somewhat self-sufficient companies like PayPal, historically they might have just built the Celigo work themselves, but now they're realizing, hey, why build Celigo 2.0 when I can buy Celigo 2.0, work with Celigo? Do you think there's a trend going around where people are more willing to kind of buy solutions and customize them instead of trying to build everything themselves?
Yeah, I think so, because part of what your licensing is the certifications that we and the other companies are doing, because as new revs are coming out for these cloud-based services like NetSuite, twice a year they're rolling out something, so we have to keep our built for NetSuite certification. So we're doing a lot of testing with the new code before it ever goes out, and we're pushing out just like on your cell phone, when a new version of iOS comes out, we have to push out the new upgrades. And so that's really what a company like iPass vendors are doing. We do the same thing with Salesforce and with BigCommerce and with Amazon. All these, we have to keep our certifications. So, that's why you're paying annual fees to help, not just license because we're out in the cloud, but also those certifications and the costs associated with that. And then for you to take that on yourself and be able to do that regression testing, all the things, that's a lot of work. So
not really as economical anymore.
Exactly. And so, and everyone's pushing out updates monthly, bi-weekly and stuff. And so it's really hard to keep up on that. So I think, paying somebody to do that is sort of a smart business move, in my opinion.
Specialists, kind of almost buying these little specialists. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Chris, this has been such a pleasure. I think our guests are really going to enjoy this. And it's been great having you as a guest today.
I appreciate the invite, and happy to spew out all this knowledge I've gained over the years.
And find him on Etsy. Find him on Etsy.
Etsy, yeah. Dolls and bears, I think, is what.
That's good. That's good. That's perfect.
So here we are. All right, guys. Isaiah, Tim, it's been great.
Thank you so much.